Hello, everyone. If you're joining us, hello, Penny from Tennessee. We'll get started in just a few minutes. So get comfortable and ready for an exciting webinar to start. Well, hello, Jody from Middleton, Pennsylvania. Oh, we've got North Carolina, Nevada, Ohio. I saw Cobb County, so somebody local. More North Carolina, New York, New Jersey. This is awesome. Great crowd. Texas, Arizona, California, Vermont. Oh, y'all are fast. More from Tennessee, Kansas, Illinois, Texas again, Syracuse, Little Rock, Australia. Welcome, Catherine. We are going to get started in about 1 minute. I love seeing all the greetings and where everyone is coming from. Yes, you will have access to the recording for the webinar. It will be sent out probably within the next 48 hours. And we will talk about that a little bit more. Okay, I think we are ready to get started. I think we're good. Okay, well, I would like to welcome everyone this evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kelly Schreiner, and I serve on the International Dyslexia Association, Georgia's Board of Directors, and I will be your host for this evening. Working behind the scenes are Jennifer Birch, Amelia Morell, and Anne-Marie Lewis. We at IDA Georgia are so excited to offer this free webinar as part of our outreach initiative. As a nonprofit organization, IDA Georgia is dedicated to helping individuals living with dyslexia, as well as their families and the communities that support them. We provide essential evidence-based research information about assessment, diagnosis, resources, and appropriate educational intervention. To increase public awareness and remediation of dyslexia, we host community outreach events, conferences, and webinars, and offer information about teacher training opportunities. We also organize an annual Dyslexia Dash, which not only raises awareness and creates a sense of community, but also raises funds for scholarships and grants for educators interested in learning more about dyslexia and structured literacy instruction. So please visit our website at ga.dyslexiaida.org. This website is frequently updated, so be sure to visit often. Tonight, we are so excited to welcome Janet Street as our presenter. Her presentation is entitled Etymology and Morphology 101, Why We Can't Just Teach Phonics. This webinar is being recorded, and all registrants will receive an email within the next 48 hours with a link to the recording, as well as information about how to receive a certificate of awareness of attendance. If you do not see that email in your inbox, be sure to check your spam and junk folders as it often lands in there. Now, Janet Street has worked with dyslexic learners at the Skank School in Atlanta, Georgia for 21 years. She has taught 3rd, 4th, and 6th grades and is now serving as the outplacement director. She is an Orton Gillingham Academy Fellow in Training and has taught hundreds of parents, tutors, and teachers about the English language and how to use the Orton Gillingham approach to help students learn to read and spell. She is the proud daughter, sister, and mother of talented and successful dyslexic people. And now it's time for Janet to take it from here.
Okay, guys, thank you, Kelly. I'm going to share my screen and get us started. Yes, guess what? We can't just teach phonics. So I know that you're probably tuned in tonight because you got bitten by the morphology bug like I did and got really curious about it. So let's talk about that. That's what she just said about me. I just want to tell you what's coming. I've got these sort of 6 sections. Going to go over some basic concepts first, so don't tune out if you get bored. Then it's just some basic stuff that we all have to get on the same page with. And then we're going to talk a little bit about roots and affixes and why I think they're so powerful. And then maybe some languages of origin, kind of how we figure out where words came from, and some weird spellings, some confounding pronunciations. And then we're going to wrap it up and do references, but don't tune out before the wrap up because the best part is in there. I'm not just teasing that, it's true. Okay, so a few basic concepts. First of all, let's just talk about these fancy words. What does a phonology mean? Well, we know phon means sound. And so ology, the study of. So this is the study of speech sounds that constitute the fundamental components of our language, right? Phonics is when we start associating those sounds with letters. Etymology is the study of the origin of words and how their meaning has changed throughout history. And morphology, again, study of morph, okay, which doesn't mean change. A lot of people think it means change. It means form. So the form of words, the meaningful units within words. Okay, we'll talk about what all that means in real life, but those are just terms to get familiar with if you aren't already. Okay, I call this the trifecta of language arts instruction, and here's why. It helps us read, spell, and define words. That's basically why. So I can read, I can break this word invisible into syllables, and I can read them invisible, okay? But I can also, it helps me spell words. I happen to know because my teacher told me that in as a prefix is spelled in. Of course, I could have sounded that one out. Viz is not V-I-Z, but it's V-I-S, and it means to see. And able, in this case, is I-B-L-E, and it's and that's my suffix, meaning able to. Now I can know how to spell it pretty easily. By the way, little fun tip, most of the time the able is spelled A-B-L-E. This is a loose generalization, but it works a good bit of the time. If you have a bound morpheme like viz, in other words, it can't stand alone. If I said viz to you, you wouldn't know what I was talking about. It's a bound root, then you use IBLE. It's not perfect, but it's somewhat helpful. Okay, so it also helps me figure out the meaning. I know in means not, viz means to see, and able means able to, so not able to see. I've just helped a child really demystify this word and many, many other words along with it. So that's why I love it, okay? And I know you do too. Okay, so English orthography, which just means spelling, preserves bits of history. It's not a failed phonetic transcription system invented out of madness or perversity. Instead, it's a more complex system that preserves bits of history. Okay, that's why we call it etymology. It facilitates understanding and it translates into sound. Okay, Words, this is a great thing to remember. Words with spelling connections also have meaning connections. Maybe you know this already, but the WR words, almost all of them have something to do with twisting, right? My wrist twists. If I wring out the laundry, I'm twisting it. A wreath is a floral arrangement twisted around a wire, a round wire. If I have a wreck, my car is twisted, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a fun thing to teach kids. If that will help them, could help them hang on to, oh, it's not an R, it's a WR. Okay. That's just a little tiny nugget that might help them when they wrap a present. Okay, they're twisting the paper around the present. All right. Okay. So the meanings of words are the sum of its parts. 80% of derived words mean what their parts suggest if the multiple meanings of the base are taken into account. Now, this root, this Latin root fer, it means bring, bear, or carry. So in the case of transfer, it means, bring across, trans meaning across. In fertile, it means bearing, like bearing fruit. A fertile tree will bear fruit. And a ferry is to carry people over a river, right? So bring, bear, carry. Fur is one of the most troublesome ones for me. It's obviously a bound root and it's really not clear. It's, I guess, been around so long and morphed over time so much that it's not always clear. But if you go back in time, you can figure it out, and I'll show you a sneaky way to do that. Okay, you have to consider both the literal meaning of the word, such as mother, someone who gave birth to a child is a mother, but also the feeling or idea behind it, which might be, in this case, mothering has a feeling around it. It's an idea. So you kind of have to consider both of those when you're looking at etymology and how words became what they did. Students who understand language structure notice and use these links in meaning. Okay, so those are kind of some big ideas we're going to talk about. English. Okay, I love this. This is from Richard Venetsky. I don't know if you can see. Let me put it here. This book. It's very powerful, very dense book, The American Way of Spelling. These are some quotes from it. English has always been rather loose immigration regulations for vocabulary. Words, unlike people, have been forever welcomed, regardless of their origins. Neither quotas nor IQ tests have ever been required for admission to the lexicon. And unlike the melting pot emphasis on assimilation in most of American history, orthography has been unencumbered by pressures to shed its alien appearance. Consequently, bijou, chalet, chauffeur retain their French garb. Trecht smacks of Dutch via Afrikaans. Or I don't even know how you say that, and Fahrenheit are still German, and vodka remains recognizably Russian. Okay, so unlike some languages that won't allow any words into their lexicon, like I'm told French is one of those, we just are kind of a melting pot, just like we are with people. Come on, let's bring it. And we just take everybody's words and do what we're going to have with them. Okay, so English becomes a morphophonemic language. My hairdresser today asked me what my webinar was about. I said, oh, it's about how English is a morphophonemic language. She was like, what? So you might have to be a teacher nerd to appreciate this. And that would be us, y'all. So morphophonemics is the interaction between morphological and phonological processes. Pronunciation of polysyllabic words is primarily determined by the placement of stress. So I could say to you, which syllable gets the emphasis? Or if I said to you, which syllable gets the emphasis, you would think I was speaking a different language. It sounds entirely different, which is why when your kids are trying to sound out a word that they, that has many syllables and they're not quite sure where to put that emphasis, it can sound so unrecognizable to them. And our job as teachers is to get them to play with that, get them to change the emphasis to the right syllable. okay, so that it doesn't sound like a foreign language. That's hard. It requires sometimes the flexing of vowel sounds, which is very difficult, especially for dyslexic learners. But play with it and have them play with it. Okay, as the numbers of syllables changes, there is a change in the stress, and that can change the way the vowels are pronounced. So I'm going to show you an example of that right now. So let's take this root ped, which means foot. Well, in the word pedal, you can see you pedal a bike with your foot. You can see how that got its name. The E is pronounced eh, but look what happens when it becomes pedestrian. Okay, now it's schwad. The E is a sound, pedestrian. And in the word impede, we have a long E sound. So this ped root, even though it's very clearly there, it has 3 different sounds. That is not terribly uncommon at all. And by the way, impede, I looked it up, and it originally had to do with the shackling of feet. So it does go back to foot. You can see how that would become impede. It's fun to go back and look at those meanings. Okay. So the power of roots and affixes. Let's just look at all these kind of basic roots and all of the words that they produce. By the way, I got so many of these great. I really want to give credit to Nancy Cushion-White, who spoke at the 2018 Academy Conference for the Orton Gilling Academy. You can see she's cited there at the bottom. It was just a fantastic presentation, and I asked her if I could use some of these, and I want to give her credit. But just look at this column right here for grad and gress. A gradient is, grad and gress means step. So a gradient is a step up at a time or a step down. A graduate is ready to take the next step. If I degrade something, I'm stepping it down. If I do something gradually, I'm going step by step. You can see how it can be so powerful when you recognize these roots to give you some hint as to what these fancy words, these mini multi-syllable words mean. Okay, so it can really help your vocabulary tremendously. And you kind of get hooked on it, or at least I have, and I think you will too. Okay. So, okay. For every word a student learns, there are 1 to 3 related words that should be understandable, and there are degrees of semantic transparency. Let's look at this first one. It's pretty obvious. The color red is an adjective. I could describe something as red, and then I could talk about the redness of it. And then I could say, well, it's kind of reddish. The apple is reddish. It's a little greenish, a little reddish. Okay. That's pretty straightforward. And you can see, red is just a simple little CVC word. I mean, once you've taught some basic endings, you could start to use some of these suffixes. Now, you have to be careful, because red with that pattern is going to trigger, as you see in reddish, it's going to trigger a spelling rule. So when you first start out with this, a lot of people send in questions about when can you start with morphology? Well, I will tell you, when you do start, make sure you're picking words that are not going to trigger spelling rules that you haven't taught. Okay, so I'm not 100%. Let me make sure that you can see this. These are tiles that you might be interested in. Arg, I hate this little thing. Sorry. You can see they're in different colors. The prefixes are green, the roots, I believe, are yellow, and the suffixes are blue. And I'll read the front to you. It's word building dominoes. I'm sure you could Google that and find it. But I find that these are fun to play with. You can kind of add them on. What's nice is that the roots that they've thrown in here, and they're two-sided, by the way, typically do not trigger that doubling rule. Okay, it's either a vowel team or it ends in 2 consonants. So you can add some of these suffixes. So like I've got right here, I've got, I can read I don't know if you can see that. You can see the top one. I've got a sticker. Okay. I could say something is non-stick. Okay. Well, it's hard to see. But anyway, the tiles can be helpful to show kids, to really bring it to life in a less abstract way, a more concrete way, just like we use manipulatives with so many other things to make it multisensory. Okay, so that's a pretty obvious connection, but look at this next one. I don't even think this one's obvious to a lot of people, a lot of adults. And that would be, I can apply something, I can create an appliance that applies that mechanism that can become an application. And then that got shortened to app. Okay, if you have an application, a software application becomes an app. These are all the same word with different affixes on it. So again, some of these are very clear, some less clear. Okay, the less morphological awareness a student has, the more distinct words need to be learned. Okay, about 60% of unfamiliar words encountered in middle school years and beyond are sufficiently transparent, even though they're morphologically complex, that a reader might be able to infer the meaning of the word. So 60% is good, but that means 40% aren't. So, you know, it's not a perfect system any more than phonics or phonology is a perfect system, but it helps a lot. And I'm going to give you some more examples of that. All right, this is a website that I've heard about. I've never actually used it. I've kind of been in it slightly, but never actually used it to teach. But I think it's pretty cool. Membean.com, some schools have it. And what they'll do is they'll have a root like spect, and they'll have all these words that spect becomes on their branches, like, you know, retrospect and introspective and circumspect, etc. Those are pretty fancy words. I've got another slide that's going to show you some simpler words for spect, but you can click on each of these, and if it's a Membean word, it really brings that word to life with pictures and I think sentences, stories, etc. So it's kind of a neat tool to investigate. I believe that there is a membership. There might be a free version and a membership version. I'm not positive about that. You'll have to investigate that. Okay, I put the website where this came from at the top of the screen here, realspelling.fr. You can create these, which I think are awesome, to really show your kids. By the way, struct is a fantastic root to begin with. Why? It's got a nice little short vowel in the middle of it. It ends in two consonants, and so it's not going to trigger your doubling rule, your E drop, your Y change. None of those suffix rules are going to matter. And it makes a gazillion words, and it's a really concrete thing that kids can relate to. They know what it means to construct something, you know, out of their Lego blocks. They know what a construction worker is. You know, they know what it is to be destructive. They certainly are destructive at times. And they can reconstruct something, and they can deconstruct something. So this is just a great one to bring alive for kids. I think even at really pretty young ages. Okay, so somebody was asking me, like, when can you start this and what's a scope and sequence? I don't have a scope and sequence, but I know you can start it in first grade, okay, in lots of different ways, both pointing out patterns, and I'll give you an example of that in a second, but also with endings. I mean, you're going to teach ing. When you teach your welds, you're going to teach ing, and they're going to spell a million words with ing, and you're going to teach ed and the three sounds it makes. That's morphology. Okay, those are meaningful parts of words. So you might even already be doing it and not even realize it so much. Okay, so let's talk about base elements. Some of them are free and can stand alone, like wash, washable. That's a word with or without affixes. But a bound root, a bound morpheme like mit, cannot stand on its own. Mit meaning to send. So if I transmit, I am transmitting right now. I'm mitting across, trans meaning across, I'm sending this to you across, gosh, lots of lines, some hardwired, some not so hardwired, right? It's just important to know that terminology, free and bound. It just means, can it stand on its own, or does it need affixes? Typically, these really old Latin roots, they are bound roots. Okay, and affixes are just prefixes and suffixes. Prefixes come at the beginning, suffixes come at the end. You can have multiple suffixes. Okay, I don't really have a slide for this, but I should say this. When you're teaching these, you should have a deck of prefixes, a deck of suffixes, a deck of roots, and get them to use those the exact same way. And of course, I didn't bring mine with me, but get them to use those the exact same way that you would any of your other decks, okay? So if I want to talk about the prefix pre, I'm going to trace P-R-E, pre, P-R-E, pre. And that's going to help me recognize it. It's going to help me learn the spelling of it. And then I always say, pick a keyword that's going to help bring them to the meaning of the prefix. The best one for pre, for instance, is preschool, because pre means before, and you went to preschool before you went to school. So pick a keyword that's going to be meaningful to them, not necessarily you. And you can put the meaning on the back of the card. If it's a suffix, you can put the part of speech and some example words. Okay, so you're going to really use these just like you would any phoneme. Okay, you're just going to keep your deck, and you're going to dictate them the same way too. We'll talk more about that in a second. Although there are about 50 suffixes used in everyday English, they appear in about half of all English words. Can you believe that? Half of all English words. Okay. This is another one of those teacher talky things to know. You have inflectional suffixes that change the part of speech, that don't change the part of speech, and derivational that do change the part of speech. So when I added the S to jump, to make jumps, I still have a verb. But when I added ness onto happy, I changed it from an adjective to a noun. Okay, here's an example of how you would do that with kids. I have the suffix here. It means two different things. It means more, as in I have a sharp pencil and I have a sharper pencil. So in that case, it's inflectional. It's just an adjective becoming an adjective. But I can also have it derivational. To teach is a verb. A teacher is a person who teaches. So you could have a whole pile of these words and have them sort them out. Is this one a person who, or is this one more? Right? Get them playing with it. Assorting is always a great thing to do. Okay, and I mean, think about it, y'all. I mean, kids in first grade could do that. They understand. They might not be able to read all those words, but they could sort those conceptually. Certainly second grade. Okay. I love this for my older students. I used to do this a lot when I taught sixth grade. Let's take a word and let's figure out how many morphemes it has, how many syllables it has, and how many phonemes it has, because it's rarely the same, right? Wooden has 2 syllables and 2 morphemes, wood and n, but it has 5 phonemes. W, d, n. Okay, 5 phonemes. Jumped is one of those weird ones where it has only 1 syllable. Certainly looks like a 2-syllable word, but because that ed is saying t, it doesn't trigger another syllable, but it has 2 morphemes. Jump is a verb and ed is denoting a past tense, and it has 5 phonemes. Vacation, there's vac, meaning empty, ate, which made it a verb, vacate, and then shun, which changed it to a noun. Okay, so vacation, so 3 morphemes, 3 syllables, 7 phonemes. Look at autobiography. This might be my favorite word. Auto meaning self, life, bio meaning life, graph meaning right, I'm writing about myself. That's an autobiography. Okay, so this is just fun for kids to play with, and they actually enjoy it, believe it or not. Okay, so morphophonemics help us spell. This is going to rock your world, or at least it rocked mine. If a word, let's look at these first three: shun, shun, and shun. Okay, is it S-I-O-N? Is it T-I-O-N? Is it C-I-A-N? How do I tell the difference? Okay, if the word ends in an S, or often double S's, well, first of all, if it says jun, it's going to be S-I-O-N. That's not T-I-O-N. T-I-O-N is the most common. Double S's means it's going to be S-I-O-N, depression, confession. If it ends in a T, it's going to be T-I-O-N. And if it's a person who does magic, is a magician, politician, physician, okay? So if it's a person who, that's C-I-A-N. Okay, that right there is very helpful, I think, to point out to kids. AR at the end of words sounds like doesn't it? Solar. Doesn't sound like solar. So how are you going to remember that it's AR and not ER? Well, look here, solarium. Here we hear the A, don't we? Solarium, solar. So if you teach them that there are multiple forms of the word, and to kind of think about those forms and hear what it sounds like in other forms of the word, it might help them remember how it's spelled. Same kind of thing here. Somebody wrote in, how do you tell the difference between IR, UR, and ER? How do you teach that? Well, that's not easy because they all say but this is one way that helps a little bit for older audiences, obviously. But expiration, well, that comes from expire. So you hear the I in expire. Okay, and that gives you a hint that in expiration, it's not going to suddenly change to an E. It's still going to be an I. Okay. And by the way, the rest of that explanation is ER is the most common. If it's, especially if it has meaning like I'm taller, okay, then it's going to be ER. You can't always say a person who is ER because there's an actor, which is OR, sounds like That's a really hard one. There's a cute, if you've ever seen, email me. I'll send you a cute little way to remember a few of them. There's a bunch of dirty words with IR and hurt words with UR, but it's really hard. There's a lot of memorization there, unfortunately. Okay, look at this one. Definite. Remember, often that middle syllable is schwad. Definite. Well, what letter is the Well, look here, define. And also, if you know that FIN means end or limit, that root, but define, you can hear the I in define. So it really can help you with that schwa. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I love this slide. Okay. You know how, Siri, for instance, cannot translate when I speak to her. She constantly writes EXCEPT when I'm saying ACCEPT. So they sound just alike, right? Accept versus accept. We don't pronounce them like that. They sound just like accept, right? But if you tell kids sept means to take, and ac is the assimilated prefix for add, meaning to, toward. If I'm taking someone toward me, I'm accepting them, okay? But if I'm taking them out, that's an exception. It's taking out. So if they just learn that X means out and ac or add means to and toward, think how that could rock your world, okay? So I find that very helpful. Hopefully you will too. Okay, a typist. The kids get these two very confused, IST and EST. A person who is an IST, If I'm saying the most, it's EST. So you do have to get cognitive about this, don't you? You have to say fastest. Is that a person who fasts? No, that's not. I'm talking about the most fast. And typist, I'm talking about a person who types. Okay. ESS versus OUS. Listen to how similar they are. Goddess, glamorous. They both sound like us, don't they? If you're not careful. And by the way, how are they going to spell us? All day long, they're going to spell it US because that's how you spell us. Until you've got that card in your suffix deck and you're tracing OUS, joyous, glamorous, etc. And here is another one that's really confusing: the full from waffle, consonant LE word, and the full in truthful, FUL. Well, if I'm full of truth, I'm truthful. Of course, they're going to try to spell it with two L's, but you've been tracing your deck and you've been dictating suffixes so that they're just writing the suffix and they're writing FUL and they're learning that's how it's spelled at the end of a word. Well, obviously, I'm not full of waff. That doesn't make any sense. So that's going to be a consonant LE, not an FUL. Okay, so those are little tips that are helpful. I told you I was going to get back to SPECT, and here it is. I love this. This is just a bunch of spectacles, and you can have your little vocabulary notebook that's interactive. You see that little dotted line, you fold up the paper, and it tells you what prospect means. Well, pro means forward, so a prospector looks forward. Okay, if I have prospects, I'm looking forward, I'm excited about the future. A spectator, I can inspect, perspective. This is just something cute you can do with your kids, okay, to help them remember SPECT. And these are much more common words, obviously. Okay, so we know from cognitive experimental research that people with morphological awareness organize their mental dictionaries so that related words are associated and more readily retrieved. Our brains work by association, don't they? The mind is always seeking that pattern recognition to make things quicker, to reduce that load on the memory. So every time you see odd, don't you think sound? If it's auditory, if it's audible in an auditorium, okay, all of those come from that same Latin root. And script or scribe, look at all those meaning writing. I can inscribe something. I can subscribe to your writing. I can be a scribe, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all associated. You might not even realize how much you associate these without even realizing it. Okay, look at this cool little thing. I'm pretty sure this comes from Teachers Pay Teachers, but I really like it. Where you could make this a station in your room if you're a classroom teacher. You've got the definition down there at the bottom, the word meaning, and they've got to sort through and find the base and the prefix and the suffix that's going to build a word that means that. So unavoidable, not able to ignore or prevent. I think that's really super cool. Again, making something very kind of abstract into something concrete. Very helpful. The only thing I would change about this, by the way, is I would not make the prefix and the suffix the same color. Me personally, I like green for a prefix, red for a suffix, starting, ending, and I like yellow for roots. That's just me. But I would definitely change the colors. Okay, just, some research here. Phonological awareness facilitates morphological awareness in younger children, and both are associated with stronger reading skills. A lot of these names you recognize. Better readers with excellent with excellent language abilities in 4th through 8th grade are able to talk about word structure and word meaning in precise and decontextualized manner that reveals a conscious knowledge of that phonology and morphology. Adults who read accurately and fluently have accumulated wide networks of word families for ready access and cross-referencing in their own lexicon. And not surprisingly, good spellers and people with large vocabularies search for and notice new words, word letter sequences that give them clues to the meaning. Okay, you don't even realize that you're doing that, but as a good reader, you are. Okay, this is another one of my favorite books. You know how you've probably seen Sandra Dona's book about phonological awareness. Well, when you get kids that are a little bit older, you can do the same kind of thing with morphological awareness. So the page is already done for you. Okay, you don't have to even, as long as you've taught the prefixes, roots, and suffixes, there's not much for you to do. They tell you at the top of the page, we're going to be going over these prefixes, roots, and the suffix. So I start out by saying, what is the suffix in contracted? It's ed, et cetera, et cetera. Change the suffix in contracted to or and say the new word, contractor. Notice that the emphasis changed to contractor. Change the prefix in contractor to d, detractor. And then it goes to detraction and distraction and distractible and distract and extract, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a great way to warm up your lesson, and it's already done for you, assuming you've taught those basic parts. Oh, look at on this cover, it's got that exact tract one, which is a good one. Okay, whoosh. Let me check my time here. I got 7:42. Am I on time? Yeah, close enough. Languages of origin. This is super fun. Basically, we got three big ones. We got Greek, Latin, and Anglo-Saxon. The words that we get from the Greek language, they're very specialized words around math, scientific words, also often arts words, so arts and science words. There are also common base elements that combine, like phon meaning sound and graph meaning write. So a phonograph, is writing of sound. Latin, we have a lot of academic language, words with lots of affixes, prefixes, suffixes, etc., and very high class words. I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. Anglo-Saxon words, on the other hand, are very common words. These are function words, common and everyday words, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. That's just a breakdown of the Latin and the French. By the way, those a lot of the French words we got through Latin, or rather the other way around. A lot of the Latin words we got through French. You'll see what I mean. England was conquered by these Angles, Jutes, and Saxons, and they brought these are some of our oldest words. Okay, so we've got one syllable words, we've got lots of vowel teams, we've got consonant LEs, silent letters. The knee, K-N-E-E, used to be pronounced knee. Okay, but then eventually it became knee, so it became a silent letter. Our floss words, double F, double L, double S, double Z, those are from Anglo-Saxon. CH saying ch. These what we call short vowel generalizations, CK, TCH and DGE. Those are Anglo-Saxon words. And TH in these short words, K in short words, WH, etc. Lots of different, the body parts, the numbers, the basic elements, colors, all of these are super common in old words. All right, but Latin, they're usually multisyllabic words. They usually have prefixes and suffixes. They have very few vowel teams other than AI. You'll see all of the shunt, the TI, SI, CI, XI kinds of endings, shull, shun, shus. Those are all Latin. The TU saying chew, like eventual, TURE saying chur, like adventure, furniture. And when you see connective I, U, or UL, factual, cardiac, those are classic Latin markings. The chameleon prefixes, those assimilated prefixes, AD turning to AT, con turning to call, in turning to ill, all right? So there's a whole list of those that I don't, email me, I'll send them to you. The soft C before EI and before E and Y, all classic Latin stuff. Here's some French things. First of all, these are often fancy Nancy words. So when you see CH saying sh, like in chef, He's not a cook, he's a chef. You know, QU or QE saying k as in unique, OU saying oo, group, OUR, so like nourish, or sorry, or nourish, course, or tour. That E at the end, like cafe, bruise, UI, 3 vowels in a row, EAU, that's not an English word, that's got to be French, right? Plateau, ETTE, et cetera, okay? And last but not least, Greek words, all kinds of arts and science words. There's often a connective O, not I or U. O is the like Democrat, crat meaning rule, dem meaning people, rule by the people is a Democrat, democratic idea. The letter Y is a vowel, like cyclone, myth, PH saying F, CK saying K. These are all classic Greek markings. Pneumonia, psychology, that silent P, ologies and X. Oh, look at this E at the end of a word that makes sounds, okay? Well, what do we teach the kids? The E at the end of the word never says anything, right? But it does sometimes, right? Apostrophe, catastrophe, assimilate. Don't tell them that. Okay, so then we have these connectives. We see the connective I, proficient, connective U, situate, connective O in the Greek, thermometer, psychology. Okay, those are just classic things to look for. Just some examples. I love my Yiddish words. It's not chutzpah, it's chutzpah and schlock and klutz. We always tell the kids there is no KL blend, but in Yiddish words there is. Okay, so this is what's fun. Just take a moment, look at this list of words, and based on what I just told you about, all those markings, which ones do you think are Anglo-Saxon, Latin, French, Greek? Just contemplate that for 1 minute before I show you the answer. Don't you hate it when the answer comes before you're ready? Okay, I'm sure you've gotten many of them, probably not all of them. Okay, so let's take a look. And then it comes to light. Let's start with our fancy Nancy French words in purple. Champagne, chauffeur. He's not a driver, he's a chauffeur. We're going to park in the garage, right? It's eloquent. It's a boutique. It's rosette. It's liqueur, liquor. Okay. So those are all some markings, that QU, the CH saying sh, that j at the end of a word. Okay. Then we have, how about our Greek ones? Look at our PHs, graphic, philanthropy. Look at our Y saying in gymnasium and Olympic. Look at our arts words like chorus, and our science words like geology and chlorine, CH saying k. Okay, and then look at our green words, our Anglo-Saxon words that are super common. You see some consonant LEs like whistle, waffle, colors, mother, just, very, very basic, mouse, skin, soot, things that the old folks lived with, like soot. And then we have Latin. Look at all of our affixes, X meaning out, by meaning to. We've got multi-syllable words, generation. We've got TI saying shun, constellation. We got the PT at the end of a word here, etc. So kids, believe it or not, really get a kick out of this. And when they start thinking of a fancy Nancy word, they're not going to spell it with SH. They're not going to spell champagne with SH. They're going to think, oh, that's a fancy Nancy French word. I'm going to spell it with CH. Okay, they really do enjoy it. All right, explaining some weird spellings. Oh my gosh, I'm exactly on time. That's terrifying. This you're going to love in first grade. This rocked my world, and it rocked the world of the first grader I was tutoring. We had been working on 2 and 2 forever, and we had traced, and we had talked about it, and we had traced in sidewalk chalk, and we had traced in our large arms, and we had traced with our fingers, and we had traced in the sand, and she could not remember the difference between TO and TWO until I said, do you know that the words that begin with TW have something to do with the number 2? And it was like such a light bulb moment. You've all had them with your students. She goes, I have twins in my class. And she literally never forgot it again because it had meaning. So that's it, our kids have a hard time hanging on to randomness, no matter how many times they trace it. But when you give it meaning, it can be extremely helpful. Look at all these words. 2 obviously has to do with 2. 12 does. 10 plus 2. 20, 10 times 2. But what about twins? Okay, there's 2 of them. What about between? You have to be between 2 things. Notice that that's a prefix, by the way, between. Tweezers, right? And pinching with 2 things. Twine is 2 pieces of string woven together, kind of like rope. And twinkle, on, off, on, off. Okay, so it's really fascinating when you think about that. It's kind of like the WR. When you bring meaning to that, it can help them. So tuck away these nuggets in your back pocket and bring them out for your kids and help them with putting some meaning behind some of the randomness. Here's a few more. All these connections, okay, look at these connections. They, them, and their, they all start with THE. You can see how it's all of those words are talking about a group of people that's not us and me. It's they, them, and their. Okay, that doesn't necessarily help you with there, and there. I have some other tricks for that. Email me. But look at this. Go, goes, going, gone. They all have the same go in them, don't they? Do, does, doing, done. The pronunciation of does is not predictable, even though the spelling is. It can be helpful to point that out. Tell, tale, told, talk. That's where that L, see that L? Believe it or not, that the scribes had a lot to do with this. I'll talk about them in a second. Will became would, shall became should. The English scribes decided to add the L to could, so that it would, even though it, I could, it didn't have an L in can, so that it would conform to its companion auxiliary verbs. Kind of fun, right? All right, let's keep it going. Oh, this is one of my favorites. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. I'm sort of obsessed. Some scribe at some point decided that lexical words or content words that have a function, they have to have at least 3 letters. And I'm talking about nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. The other little words that we have in our language, such as prepositions, pronouns, conjunctions, those don't have to have 3 letters. So look at this top row. Odd, egg, air, and ebb. Why do those have 3 letters? We don't usually double D's or double G's or double R's or double B's. We double F's, L's, and S's, but not these. Well, these have double letters because those are lexical words. They are odd is an adjective, right? Egg is a noun. So they decided they had to have 3 letters. As opposed to, now look at these pairs. Look at these homophones, in and in. If I'm talking about going in the store, that's a preposition. I just need 2 letters. But if I'm going to stay at the hotel called the Inn, well, that's a noun. I need 3 letters. How cool is that? They distinguish between 4 and 4, 2 and 2. So 2 being a being a preposition, I'm going to go to the store. but TOO being an adverb. He is too friendly. Okay. I just think that's the coolest thing ever. And I had no idea why that was until I went to Nancy Cushion White's presentation. She rocked my world there. And also this I think is really cool. These words can be spelled with a Y grapheme to represent the I phoneme, like cry, dry, try. Why are you able to use the letter Y? Because the word starts with either a digraph or a blend. So I end up with 3 letters. But what about these other words? Lie, tie, die. That would have only given me, if I'd used a Y, I would have ended up with only 2 letters, which breaks my rule. So they just put in IE. And that's why there are very few words that have IE at the end. And it's just this little subset, pie, die, lie, tie. Those are the only ones your kids even know. They don't know what vi is. How cool is that? And then of course it changes to Y when you put an ing on it. Anyway, we're having fun now. Okay, so it's all about that 3-letter rule. Okay, many English spellings reflect the principle of maintaining consistent spelling for morphemes. So for instance, look at these silent letters in sign, bomb, and hymn. You might be thinking, why can't you just drop the silent letter? But look what happens when we get signature, bombardment, and hymnal. Okay, and now all of a sudden I hear that silent letter. Okay, so you don't want to drop it because it's an etymological marker. That's a fun word. Say that 3 times fast. Etymological. By the way, the next time you play hangman with your kids, use this word hymn, Hymn. You will win every single time. If that were a 5-letter word, it would be on Wordle, which of course I'm obsessed with. All right, here is another fun scribe thing. The scribal O. Okay, let's explain this. Before the printing press, monks who were scribes noticed that many of their quill-penned letters were very difficult to read. Why? Because they had so many up and down strokes. Look at the M, N, W, U, R, and V. Very similar up and down strokes. So they decided to just change that U to an O when it appeared adjacent to one of those letters, but they couldn't change the pronunciation of the word. And that's how we got love and mother, because isn't that easier to read than L-U-V-E and M-U-T-H-E-R? And that explains why those words, you know how there's that set of words where O says brother, love, some, wonder. Now you know what, now you don't have to wonder why. Okay, the scribes also added an E to the end of some words that ended with this sound because they didn't want it to look like a plural noun. Is this F-A-L-S? Is that 1 fall, 10 falls? No, this is false, okay? So they added that E to make it clear that it's not a plural noun. Sometimes they added CE, so instead of S, like face, okay? Okay, this is super cool too. And it is when 2 words are pronounced the same, if possible, they will be spelled differently to mark the differences in their meaning. Let's look at heel, the back of your foot, and heal. I had COVID, but I was healed eventually. Okay, look at heal and health. See that similarity? That's a way you can tell your kids to remember it. Okay, steal and stealth versus steal the metal. Loan has the word one in it, okay, versus loan that you get at the bank. Scene has the word see in it versus a scene in a movie. Grow has grown in it versus, oh, I'm going to groan. And believe it or not, knead, when you knead the dough, you did that with your knee or maybe your elbow or whatever. That's where that came from versus need, I need a drink. That's terrible. Okay, so that's kind of a fun thing. to see. So now let's look at a couple of confounding pronunciations. Now, this is a special form of torture. This long vowel sound, sane, when I add an ending, suddenly it's sanity. My vowel sound changes. We need to point this out to kids so that they recognize that it's the same word. It's the same word origin. Don't let it throw you off that when you added a suffix, it changed the emphasis, it changed the syllable that was emphasized, and it changed sometimes the vowel sound. Okay. Point this out to them. It will be helpful. Vice, vicious. Nature, natural. Horoscope, telescope, telescopic. Study, studious. Analyze, analysis, or analysis. I say abbreviate, brevity. Decisive, decision. Finite, finish. Okay, so that is just something that happens, and it's helpful to point it out to kids. Okay, I had a question about schwa. Schwa is very, very hard to teach. I do have a couple of nuggets for you. It's that unstressed vowel. So it's never in the accented syllable. Okay, an accented syllable will always have often a long sound, sometimes a short sound, but never a schwa sound. The schwa sound is when any of the vowels, all of the vowels make schwa sounds, and it's just that sound. It's basically kind of lazy mouth, honestly. We just kind of slur over it, if you will. It's represented with that kind of upside down backwards E. Okay, so let me just show you in these last three bullet points, I think might be the most helpful to you in teaching this. When a word ends in a letter A, it's going to be pronounced cola, soda, zebra. Okay, so that's one time when you're going to see a schwa. Another time is these super common prefixes from Anglo-Saxon words, the A and the B. So like about, around, asleep, all of those, behind, beyond, because, betwixt, between. By the way, they're going to say, oh, I don't pronounce it that way, Miss Street. I say behind. Well, if you're saying the word in isolation, you might say behind, but I promise you, when you put it in a sentence, it's going to get schwad. And if they argue with you all day long, just say, okay, whatever you say. But know that you're right. Okay, in the middle syllable, not the first syllable, not the last syllable, but that medial syllable, you're going to hear a schwa sound very often. So here's an A saying aggravate. Here's an I, experiment. Here's an O, thermostat. Okay. Y, there are some letter Ys that make a schwa sound, like an analysis, but it's pretty rare. They're very, very few. I would say I is really common. The others are pretty common. Okay. Okay. Oh my gosh, I love accenting rules. So I make my accents after the syllable going toward the syllable. So like water, the first syllable is accented. By the way, a lot of dyslexic people don't hear accents at all. And when you teach them, you can use that little trick of calling the dog. So if your dog's name was Water, you would say water. And that longer, higher syllable is where the accent is. Some kids still can't do that. That's okay. But there are a few little handy accenting rules. The first one is most two-syllable words, the first syllable is accented. Water, pencil, ugly, whatever the word is. It's usually two syllables, first one's accented. Also, if you have a word with a base, a root, you're not typically going to accent the prefix or the suffix. You're going to typically accent the base, the root. Subjective. Got to move this over. Prevent. Okay. If a word, a word of 3 or more syllables ends in a silent E, you're going to count back 3 in accent. Difference. So fur right here is the root, but here I am accenting the prefix difference. Protuberance. Okay. By the way, the British do pronounce things slightly different than we do. They say controversy and advertisement. So their accents can be different, and sometimes we don't even know what they're talking about, and vice versa. And all of the syllables that come before the TI, SI, CI, XI, as well as ik, are going to be accented. So watch this: magician, politician, vacation. Okay, the accent before the the TI, SI, CI, XI. And same with ik, magical, hysterical, economic, veracity. Okay, so all of those endings accent right before it. Same thing with connectives, connective I, U, and UL. Experience, evaluate, regular, the accent before. These are fun. Sometimes now a word can be a noun or a verb, such as in, if it's a noun, it's the first syllable that's accented. I'm going to give you a present. If it's a verb, it's the second syllable is accented. I'm going to present you with a present. Okay. The un and ear syllable is accented. Raccoon, commandeer. And last but not least, but the syllable that comes before ia is accented, as in dyslexia, begonia. By the way, these are often places and plants and diseases or conditions. Leukemia, Pennsylvania, petunia, super fun. Okay. This is when the magic happens. Are you ready? You've waited for it. You've been very patient. You've gone on Google a million times. You've probably even typed in define cucumber or define ubiquitous or define whatever word you didn't know. And you can do that, and it'll come up with a great little definition. You can click on this little speaker and it will pronounce the word for you, which is awesome. What you might not know is this little bitty arrow right here brings up translations and more definitions. Wait, what? Look at this, cucumber. It shows us that it came from Latin originally, cucumis and cucumber, and then it went to Old French, cocombre and cucombre, and then late Middle English, cucumber. And it shows you over time what the usage has been. And of course, you can translate it into other languages here, which is super cool. You can also, when you click on pronunciation, it will bring up lips. If you click on the video of the lips, it will show you how the lips are moving. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, I don't know how Google, they do everything. This was my great discovery recently. I always wondered why biscuit was spelled the way it was. And check this out. It comes from cooking twice. Okay, this biscuits were cooked in a twofold process, first baked and then dried out in a slow oven that so that they would keep. How cool is that? And that's, you see the bi for two, and the CUI comes from coquere, I guess, from Latin to cactus, and became French and then Middle English. So that's why it's spelled that way. Okay, I know that's nerdy, but it makes me happy. All right. I just wanted to say one more thing, that Common Core, this does meet with Common Core. If you're bound to be teaching with that, there are some places in the Common Core where it does refer to morphology. And then just for fun, you might not know what a funambulist is, but if you look at that, you might think ambular. I know that has something to do with walking. What could it be? Oh, it's a tightrope walker. Look at that. Funis meaning rope, ambular meaning walk. You might not know filipendulous. But you might see penned and think hang, like pendulum. Okay. So you look and says, oh, look, hanging by a thread. Phylum is thread, pendere to hang. And one more, this is nudiastertian of the day before yesterday, which comes from the phrase in Latin, and I can't say that, but it means now is the third day. Anyway, I just point these fun things out to show you that you can get some hints as to what words. Here's your references. Yeah, I can stop talking and start answering questions. What questions did we have?
Okay, Janet, thank you so much for all of that information. I don't know about the rest of our attendees, but I'm looking forward to watching this video again so that I can soak up some of those a little bit slower.
I know, Kelly, I had to do the same thing when I saw Nancy Cushion White presented. I was like, whoa, that was so cool, but I got to read it again.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, and they've let people know in the chat, the slides will be available, correct, with the recording?
I have no idea. I'll find out. I can make them available. Let's put it that way.
We'll get like a PDF of the slides afterwards so that they can have some of this information in print. So hopefully that is correct.
Yes.
A few of the questions that were presented ahead of time, but here are some others that you may want to go into. One of them is, do you have a way of explaining to parents that OG is not just phonics, but it also involves other skills such as morphology?
Gosh, I mean, I don't see how anybody ever thought OG was just phonics. That sort of baffles me, because when I was taught OG, it was never ever presented as just phonics. And I mean, I would just give them the example. Most parents don't even realize that the ending ed says d, t, in ed or id. Just take that very simple thing that's a first grade concept, and right away you realize I can't just teach phonics. You know, I've got to really bring some meaning to this. Even the word to, TWO. I'll never ever forget that little girl's face and how she never forgot the spelling of that again. So bringing that meaning, and that in that case, it's really kind of etymological if you think about it, more than morphological. But I just don't think you can discount any of it. And I think, you know, you might say, well, that's kind of teacher knowledge. Well, some of it is, but some of it is teacher knowledge that you can pull out of your back pocket sometimes and explain to kids, look, it really isn't a mystery. There really is a reason it's this way. And that's comforting, I think, in some ways to kids, because otherwise it just feels, English feels very daunting, I think. I know I had Mrs. Watkins in the 5th grade. I'll never forget her. And she had us look in the dictionary and just write down every single word we could find that ended in TION. And that was the first time that I realized, oh my gosh, words, they're just math. You're just adding parts on. And it was like my whole world was rocked, because I loved math and I could add. And so that just made so much sense to me.
Well, and I think those magic little tricks that to the kids, it really is magic. Those TW words, you know, meaning two, it's like, wow, I just learned a trick that I can remember. I think
I hope you go
everything.
tomorrow. Go in your classroom tomorrow and use that. Yeah, absolutely.
That and the WR means twisted.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about that. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I hope the rest of the people agree.
And remember, I was just the lucky recipient of this knowledge from somebody else. I mean, it's not like I invented it. I mean, I'm just, you know, passing it on.
Okay, here's your next question. You say in your description that we can't just teach phonics, but the teaching of phonics actually interferes with an understanding of morphology. Are you suggesting that morphology and etymology are study topics that can be added onto phonics?
I think to me, it's a both and. It's not an either or. And I I don't see them as conflicting. I don't know. I guess I don't get too hung up on it. I just think it's always gone together, at least in the way I was taught and the way I've always taught. I think it's a both and, I don't think you could teach phonics without morphology, and I certainly don't think you could teach morphology without phonics. So I hope that makes sense.
I think it does. What do you do for multilingual students in terms of morphology?
That's a great question. I'm going to be completely honest with you on this one. I have not taught a lot of multilingual students, and so I have not had to deal with that challenge. I feel for you. I do recognize it's a challenge. Sometimes it's helpful in the sense that if you have a Spanish speaking student, you can pick up on, Spanish is a Romance language, so it came from Latin. So like the prefix con means with, and that's exactly what it means. It's pronounced con in Spanish, like chili con queso. So I always tell that to the kids, like, yes, you do know what that means. Chili con queso means, chili with cheese. So sometimes it can work to your advantage. And I know a lot of the non-English speaking kids in the US are Spanish speaking, and it's kind of a way to celebrate their language too. But, honestly, full disclosure, I haven't had to deal with it a lot. What I will say this, I think every foreign language should be taught in a morphophonemic way. Instead of just having, for instance, my kids had to learn French, my dyslexic kids had to learn French when they were in elementary school, because that was the only language that was offered at the time. And I went into the French teacher and I said, hey, I'm just curious, do you ever teach, kind of the phonics of French? She had this blank look. And I said, like that EU says, because we don't have that in our language. And she was like, I don't really know what you mean by phonics. I just speak French. And I was like, okay, this conversation's over. And so, you see that, unfortunately, you see that in a lot of foreign language teachers. They're hired because they have the native tongue, but they might not have any understanding of how to actually teach, like with the Norton Gillingham method. So that's very unfortunate. I say to dyslexic kids, take Latin, take Spanish, it's very regular, take sign language. They're starting to offer sign language in some schools, and you don't have to have any phonemes for that. So, and very helpful. You can get a job.
Yes, you can be an interpreter.
Exactly.
Do you have any game suggestions for morphology?
Great idea. You can make anything into game. You can make anything into a bingo board. You can put a bunch of prefixes on your bingo board and play bingo with it, call out the name of the prefix. You could do one of these snakes and ladders kind of boards. I used to have a generic one that I would always use. Or you could have a little steps along the way, OUS, FUL, re, dis. And you could, if you picked a card and your prefix was on that card and you could move to the next prefix, just building awareness or somehow making a meaning between the prefix and the actual spot on the board. We used to do, I had a smart board when I was in the classroom, and the smart company had a lot of games you could play. And like we would build the games on there, a bunch of matching games and, that kind of thing.
The memory games where
yes,
turn over a prefix in a root word. Does it go together?
Exactly.
Create a word.
Yeah. How many, let's talk, why don't you, take these tiles, throw them on the table, who can build the most words in 3 minutes?
And that was actually one of our questions. Where did you get the tiles?
I think I got them at one of those teaching stores. I want to say it's made by Educational Insights, but it's called Word Building Dominoes. And again, I do like the way the prefix is green and the root is yellow. I just think that's helpful. They're pretty good. You know, again, just make something to play
Be
with.
creative.
Yeah, something to make it concrete.
What is the best website to use in order to figure out the etymology of a word? Well, I think you just showed us. It was Google.
Oh my gosh, how cool is that? And
Too easy.
I have never had a single person who had seen that before. And that little down arrow has been there the whole time. You just type in define capricious, and it comes up with the definition and everything. But then you just click that down arrow and it shows you all that incredible information. So somebody, I think, just put on the chat an Amazon website for the Dominoes. Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yes. And there was another question. Would you recommend
Etym Online? Yeah, that's funny. I have used it before, but I had somebody else ask a question that saying they found it hard to use. I actually find it kind of hard to use too. To be honest with you, like Google's right there. I mean, I don't know. Feels pretty easy. And I'm sure it's like Wikipedia where there's probably some mistakes, but hey, good enough for me.
And easy, and most people have access to it, so it's easy.
And kids have access to it.
Yes. One more. Should morphemes be spelled out instead of pronounced, since we do not know what their pronunciation will be once they attach to a word?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. By the way, prefixes can change their sound too. Think about how pre sounds in preschool versus the way it sounds in pretend. Okay, so they can change the way they sound. I don't know. That's probably above my pay grade. I always just pronounced it. I had them trace it and learn the meaning and say script, scribe, script, whatever. But I didn't, I mostly want them to get the general sense of it. I'm a very practical person. Like I don't get hung up on a lot of the, I don't know. I just don't get hung up on a lot of that. If I think that it's going to help a student to learn a word and to help with the spelling of it, I just do it. And a lot of this, I don't know the research behind it. I mean, there was an interesting thing. I don't know how many people get that spell talk email, but there was a really interesting thread this week about roots and how there's really no research evidence for teaching roots. And oh boy, you can imagine how much feedback the person got for saying that, because we all love roots, right? And we love teaching them. We do think it's helpful. But he was making the point that, well, there's not a lot of research on it. So interesting. I tend to go with what seems to work.
Okay. One final thing is people would like your email address.
Oh, I think somebody stuck it in there.
If we can get Jen or someone to put it.
Yeah, it's in the chat.
And we'll make sure it's on the website with the presentation too.
The hardest part of my email address, jstreet@skank.org, is how to spell skank. It's SCHENCK, good luck.org. David Skank, our beloved David Skank, had a Dutch pronunciation. So like school and skank. In German, it's pronounced schenk. I'm like, go with that, please. Siri,
yeah, that's always been a tricky one.
I had a sixth grader once say, Miss Street, it's bad enough that we're dyslexic. Do we have to go to a school called Skank? I was like, yeah, no, sorry, babe.
Well, Jen has just posted it in the chat for those of you that want to contact Janet. And Janet, thank you again for sharing your wealth of knowledge in this field. It was a very entertaining and educating presentation.
Absolutely thrilled to do it.
And as a reminder to all of our registrants, you will receive an email within the next 48 hours with a link to the webinar recording, as well as information about how to receive the certificate of attendance. If you do not see that email in your inbox, please be sure to check your junk and spam folders. And also be sure to go to the Georgia IDA website. It was ga.dyslexiaida.org, sorry. And you will be able to get a link to the slides from tonight's presentation. And again, Janet, thank you so much. Do you have final closing words?
A closing word. If you want a really fun book to read this summer, read Bill Bryson, The Mother Tongue. It is hilarious. If you've ever read Bill Bryson before, he's so funny. And this is all about all the topics that we just talked about. But he's hysterical. I mean, you'll be laughing and your friends will say, "What are you reading?" And you'll say, "You don't want to read this, but it's funny." He's the one who read A Walk in the Woods, if you ever read that about the Appalachian Trail.
Yes.
So one of my favorite books.
Well, thank you so much. And that concludes our program for tonight. Check the website for more outreach programs to come in the future.